I found the hidden bank account 3 weeks before my wedding, but the worst part was not the money. The worst part was realizing my fiancé had spent almost a year building a quiet little cage around my life, one loving suggestion at a time, until I was standing in our kitchen with my resignation letter already sent, my wedding dress hanging upstairs, and a bank statement in my hands that proved he had never needed me to quit my job at all. I was 36 years old enough to know better, old enough to have survived one bad relationship, 2 layoffs, and enough unpaid bills in my 20s to understand that money was never just money. Money was freedom. Money was choices. Money was the ability to walk out of a room when someone started lying to your face. And 3 weeks before I was supposed to marry Daniel Carter, I realized I had handed him almost all of mine. Say it with me, he had told me the night before, smiling across the dinner table like we were rehearsing vows. No more burnout. No more toxic boss. No more begging for vacation days. After the wedding, you finally get to breathe. I remember forcing myself to smile, even though my stomach felt tight. Because on paper, Daniel sounded perfect. He was 41, calm, successful, respected at his firm in downtown Nashville, the kind of man who sent flowers to my office after a hard meeting and remembered exactly how I liked my coffee. He never yelled. He never slammed doors. He never called me names. That made it harder to explain the pressure, because pressure does not always come with shouting. Sometimes it comes wrapped in concern. Sometimes it comes with a hand on your lower back and a soft voice saying, "Baby, I just want what's best for us." When Daniel first suggested I quit my job, I laughed because I thought he was joking. I was a senior operations manager for a medical supply company outside Nashville, and while the work was exhausting, it was mine. My paycheck paid my car note, my student loans, my insurance, my little savings contributions, and the part of myself that still needed proof I could stand on my own. But Daniel kept bringing it up. Not every day. That would have been too obvious. He brought it up at the right moments, when I was already tired, when my boss sent another late email, when I came home with a headache, when I forgot dinner in the oven and cried over burnt chicken like a crazy woman. "You're killing yourself for people who would replace you in a week," he said once, rubbing my shoulders while I sat on the edge of the bed. And the painful thing was, he was not entirely wrong. My job had been draining me. My boss was cold, the hours were brutal, and I had started waking up every Monday with my jaw clenched before my alarm even rang. Daniel noticed all of it. At least, that was what I told myself. He noticed because he loved me. He noticed because he wanted to protect me. He noticed because we were about to become husband and wife, and maybe marriage meant letting someone else carry the weight for once. That was the story I accepted because it was easier than the other one. The first red flag came when he asked me not to tell my mother yet. We were sitting in his SUV outside the bridal shop after my final dress fitting, and I had just mentioned that Mom would probably panic if I quit before the wedding. Daniel's expression changed for half a second. It was small. So small I almost missed it. His jaw tightened, then relaxed, and he reached over to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. "Let's keep this decision between us for now," he said. "Your mom still sees you as a scared little girl. I see you as my future wife." That sentence landed exactly where he wanted it to. I had spent most of my adult life trying to prove I was not scared. So I nodded. I did not tell my mother. I did not tell my sister. I did not tell my best friend Lauren, who had already side-eyed Daniel twice during wedding planning and once whispered, "He smiles like a pastor and negotiates like a lawyer." Instead, I let Daniel help me draft the resignation letter. He sat beside me at the kitchen island, close enough that his cologne filled the air, and he edited my words until they sounded polished, grateful, final. When I hesitated before clicking send, he put his hand over mine. "Trust me," he said. So I did. I clicked send. My boss accepted my resignation within 40 minutes. No phone call. No counteroffer. Just a short email saying they appreciated my service and wished me well. I stared at the screen, waiting to feel relief, but all I felt was the ground shifting beneath me. Daniel opened a bottle of champagne that night. He kissed my forehead and called it the first day of our real life. But while he celebrated, I kept thinking about my health insurance, my retirement account, my emergency fund, and the strange little fear that had started moving around my chest like a trapped bird. Over the next week, Daniel changed. Not in a dramatic way. That would have been easier. He simply became more certain. He started saying my house again, even though he had spent months calling it our home. He suggested I cancel my separate checking account after the honeymoon because married people should not act like roommates. He told me I should sell my car after the wedding and drive his old Lexus, since I would not be commuting anymore. Each suggestion came with logic. Each concern I raised made me sound difficult. And every time I pushed back, he looked wounded, like I had accused him of something ugly. Then came the bank statement. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, folded inside a plain white envelope with no return address, mixed in with wedding RSVP cards and a coupon booklet from Kroger. I almost threw it away. But my name was handwritten on the front. Not Daniel and Claire. Just Claire. Inside was one sheet of paper. At first, I thought it was junk mail, some fake financial advertisement made to look official. Then I saw Daniel's full name. Daniel Michael Carter. A bank I did not recognize. An account ending in 8841. And a balance that made my fingers go cold. $312,408. 17. I read it 3 times before my mind accepted the number. Daniel had told me he was comfortable, yes. He owned the house, had a good job, drove a nice car, and paid for dinners without blinking. But he had also told me the wedding was stretching him thin. He had asked me to cut flowers from the budget. He had asked me to use part of my savings for the photographer. He had accepted $3,000 from my mother for the reception deposit with humble eyes and a soft thank you. And now I was staring at proof that he had over $300,000 hidden in an account he had never once mentioned. My first thought was not even anger. It was confusion. Maybe it was old money. Maybe it was an investment account. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation, because surely the man who had asked me to give up my income before marriage would not be hiding enough money to change both our lives. Then I saw the second page. It was a transaction summary. Most of it looked normal at first. Transfers, deposits, withdrawals. But one line near the bottom made my mouth go dry. A recurring monthly payment. $2,750. Memo: A. Whitmore, lease support. I did not know anyone named A. Whitmore. Daniel had never mentioned anyone named A. Whitmore. And as I stood there in the kitchen, still holding the paper, my phone buzzed with a text from him. Don't make dinner tonight, babe. I'm working late. Love you. I looked back at the statement, then at the text, then at the account balance again. And for the first time since I met Daniel, I did not wonder whether I was overthinking. I wondered how long he had been lying. I did not call Daniel that night because something in me knew that if I heard his voice, calm and warm and perfectly practiced, I would hand him the truth before I understood it myself. So I folded the bank statement, placed it under the silverware tray in the kitchen drawer, and did the one thing I had been trained not to do in that relationship. I waited. For 3 hours, I moved through the house like a woman pretending not to bleed. I wiped the counters. I watered the basil plant on the windowsill. I opened the refrigerator twice and stared at nothing. Every sound outside made my body tighten, because I kept imagining Daniel walking through the door, kissing my cheek, and somehow knowing I had found the first loose thread in his perfect little story. He came home at 10:37. I remember the exact time because I was sitting on the couch with a glass of water in my hand, watching the clock like it had personally betrayed me. Daniel walked in wearing his navy suit, his tie loosened just enough to look exhausted, not careless, and he smiled when he saw me. Still awake, he asked, dropping his keys into the ceramic bowl by the door. That bowl had been my idea. A small domestic thing. A wedding registry kind of thing. Now it sounded like a trap closing every time his keys hit it. Couldn't sleep, I said. He crossed the room and kissed my forehead, but for the first time, I noticed how quickly he looked past me, scanning the coffee table, the kitchen island, the mail basket. It was brief. Too brief to accuse. But my stomach caught it. You ate, he asked. Not really. He frowned with that gentle concern I used to mistake for love. Claire, you have to take better care of yourself now that you're not working. Now that you're not working. The words landed differently after the bank statement. Before, they sounded protective. That night, they sounded like ownership. I wanted to ask him who Whitmore was. I wanted to ask why he had $300,000 hidden while my mother was helping pay for our wedding. I wanted to ask why he had pushed me out of my job like a man clearing furniture from a room before locking the door. But I did not. I smiled, small and tired, and said I was just overwhelmed. Daniel sat beside me, put his arm around my shoulders, and told me the wedding stress would pass. Then he said something that made my skin go cold. After the honeymoon, I'll take care of all the financial stuff, he said. You won't have to worry about accounts, bills, or any of that noise. Any of that noise. That was what he called the thing that had kept me safe my entire adult life. My money, my bills, my independence. The next morning, he left early for a client breakfast, and I waited until his SUV disappeared down the street before I pulled the bank statement from under the silverware tray. My hands were steadier than I expected. Fear had moved into a new shape by then. It had become focus. I opened my laptop and searched the name exactly as it appeared. Whitmore. At first, there were too many results, so I added Nashville, then Tennessee, then Daniel's firm name, then the bank name. Nothing clean appeared. No obvious scandal. No social media profile screaming affair. No woman posing beside him on a beach. Just fragments. A property record. A rental listing. A business registration that had been closed 2 years earlier. And then, on page 4 of the search results, I found a public court document from Davidson County. The name was Aubrey Whitmore. I clicked it before I could talk myself out of it. The document was not dramatic. That almost made it worse. It was a civil filing about unpaid rent from several years earlier, dry and plain and full of legal language, but there was an address listed near the bottom. An apartment complex in Franklin, 28 minutes from Daniel's house. The payment on his hidden account said lease support. Aubrey Whitmore had a rental history in Franklin, and Daniel had been working late more and more often since I quit my job. I sat there staring at the screen while the house around me seemed to grow too quiet. Then my phone rang. Lauren. I almost ignored it because I had not told her about my resignation, and shame has a way of making good people feel dangerous. But I answered. Tell me you did not actually quit, she said, without saying hello. My throat closed. What? Claire, she said, slower now. Your old assistant called me. She said your farewell lunch is Friday. I shut my eyes. My old assistant, Megan, knew Lauren from my birthday dinner last year, and apparently my private decision had not stayed private for long. Daniel and I decided it made sense, I said, but even I heard how weak it sounded. Lauren went silent for 1 full second. Then she said no. He decided it made sense. That should have made me angry. Instead, it almost made me cry. Because I wanted someone to say the thing I was too embarrassed to say myself. I told her about the bank statement. Not everything. Not the way Daniel had looked around the room when he came home. Not the sudden, ugly feeling that I had been studied, managed, and slowly cornered. But I told her about the hidden account and the recurring payment to Aubrey Whitmore. Lauren did not gasp. She did not dramatize it. That was why I trusted her. She simply said, do not confront him until you know what you're looking at. I'm getting married in 3 weeks, I whispered. Then you have 3 weeks to find out who you're marrying. By noon, I was in my car outside the apartment complex in Franklin. I told myself I was only going to drive by. Just look at the building. Just prove to myself I was being irrational. The complex was quiet, clean, expensive enough to explain the payment, but not fancy enough to look suspicious. I parked across from Building C, because that was the building listed in the old court filing, and I sat there with my sunglasses on, feeling like a criminal in my own life. At 12:46, a woman walked out carrying a toddler on her hip. She had dark blonde hair, black leggings, and the exhausted grace of someone who had been awake since sunrise. She laughed at something the child said. Then she turned slightly, and I saw Daniel's firm logo on the small lunch cooler hanging from her shoulder. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Maybe she worked there. Maybe she knew someone there. Maybe there were still 100 harmless explanations, though each one felt thinner than the last. Then a boy around 7 ran out behind her, holding a stuffed dinosaur in one hand and a plastic folder in the other. "Mom," he yelled, "you forgot the card for Mr. Daniel." The woman turned back toward him. My whole body went cold. Because the little boy lifted the folder and on the front, written in thick blue marker, were the words, "Thank you for paying for my school." I sat across the street from Building C with both hands gripping the steering wheel, watching that little boy hold up the card like it was nothing, like those 5 words had not just cracked open the floor beneath my entire life. "Thank you for paying for my school." For a few seconds, I could not move, could not breathe properly, could not even blink, because my mind kept trying to place Daniel into some innocent version of that sentence, some generous, charitable, misunderstood version where he had helped a struggling coworker's child and simply forgotten to mention it. But Daniel did not forget things that made him look good. That was one thing I knew for sure. If Daniel had been paying a child's school tuition out of kindness, he would have told the story with quiet humility at dinner, let me admire him, then gently acted embarrassed when my mother called him a good man. Instead, he had hidden the account, hidden the payments, hidden Aubrey Whitmore, and pushed me to quit my job while he was quietly sending almost $3,000 a month to a woman with 2 children who clearly knew him well enough to make thank you cards. The woman, Aubrey, bent down in front of the boy, brushed something from his cheek, then took the folder from his hands and tucked it into her tote bag. I watched her lips move. I could not hear what she said. But the boy smiled, and the toddler on her hip reached for her hair, and the whole scene looked painfully ordinary, like a life that had been going on long before I arrived outside that apartment building pretending I was not falling apart. Then Aubrey looked toward the parking lot. Not directly at me, just in my direction. Still, I ducked slightly, ashamed of myself even though I was the one being lied to. That was the strangest part. I was sitting there with proof that Daniel had hidden something serious from me, yet I felt dirty for looking. Aubrey buckled the toddler into a gray Honda, then helped the boy into the back seat, and as she walked around to the driver's side, I noticed a small gold necklace resting against her collarbone. It was not expensive. It was not flashy, but it had a tiny letter D hanging from it. I stared until my eyes burned. Then my phone buzzed. Daniel. For one insane second, I thought he could see me. The screen showed his name, the little heart emoji I had added after we got engaged, and a photo of him kissing my temple on a hiking trail outside Chattanooga, back when I still believed peace meant safety. I let it ring. Then a text came through. "How's my beautiful bride today?" I looked up at Aubrey's car pulling away from the curb, then back down at his message, and something inside me shifted from fear into something sharper. Not bravery yet. Not confidence. Just the first tiny refusal to keep being stupid for him. I followed Aubrey. I know how that sounds, and I am not proud of it, but when your future husband has convinced you to give up your income, hide decisions from your family, and trust him with your entire financial life, shame becomes a luxury you cannot afford. She drove carefully, almost painfully carefully, like someone used to having children in the car, and I stayed far enough behind to avoid looking obvious. First, she stopped at a private elementary school with brick columns and a manicured lawn, the kind of place Daniel once said was ridiculously overpriced when we drove past it on our way to brunch. I watched the boy climb out, sling his backpack over one shoulder, and hand the folder to Aubrey before he ran inside. She stood there for a moment after he disappeared, pressing her lips together like she was holding back tears. Then she kissed the toddler's forehead, returned to the car, and drove away. That should have been enough. A normal woman would have gone home, called a lawyer, canceled the florist, and started making a list of every account she needed to protect. But I was not acting like a normal woman yet. I was still acting like a woman in shock, a woman who had to see the whole monster before she could believe it had teeth. So I followed her to a small medical office park 15 minutes away. She parked near the back, got the toddler from the car seat, and walked into a pediatric therapy clinic with a bright blue sign and cartoon clouds painted on the windows. That was when the situation became heavier than an affair. This was not just Daniel sneaking around with some woman from his past. This was money, children, school, medical appointments, rent, and a secret structure built carefully enough that it had survived right beside our wedding planning without ever touching the surface of my life. While I sat in the parking lot, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a voicemail from Daniel. I should not have listened to it, but I did. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, his voice soft and easy, the voice that had talked me out of my job, my doubts, and almost my own instincts. "I just wanted to remind you that we have the meeting with the financial planner tomorrow, so bring your bank login information, okay? It'll make combining everything smoother after the wedding. Love you." For a moment, I just stared at the dashboard. Then I started laughing. Not because anything was funny, because this was simply absolute madness. The man had over $300,000 in an account I knew nothing about, was sending monthly payments to a woman whose child thanked him for school. And now he wanted my bank login information so our marriage could begin with him knowing every dollar I had left. I drove home with the radio off, my hands cold, my mind suddenly clean in the cruelest way. The house looked different when I walked in. The framed engagement photo on the console looked staged. The wedding invitations looked like evidence. The resignation letter, still printed on my desk because Daniel said it was symbolic, looked like a confession I had written against myself. I went upstairs, opened the closet, and pulled out the small fireproof box I kept behind my winter coats. Inside were my passport, birth certificate, car title, old tax returns, and the savings bonds my grandmother had given me before she died. Daniel did not know about the box. That realization almost made me cry with relief. There was still one corner of my life he had not touched. I took photos of the bank statement. I copied the account number. I photographed the transaction line to Aubrey Whitmore. Then I called Lauren and told her everything, all of it this time, including the school card, the necklace, the clinic, and Daniel's voicemail about my bank login. When I finished, she was quiet for so long that I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, "Claire, listen to me very carefully. This is not just cheating. This is control." The word landed hard. Control. Not concern. Not protection. Not love with rough edges. Control. Lauren told me to come to her place, but I said I needed one more thing first. I needed to know what Daniel planned to do with my money. So that night, when he came home with Thai takeout and a smile calm enough to make me question my own sanity, I sat across from him at the kitchen island and played the part he had written for me. I looked tired. I looked grateful. I looked like a woman who still believed him. When he mentioned the financial planner again, I nodded and asked what accounts I should bring. "All of them," he said, without hesitation, as he opened the takeout container and handed me chopsticks. Checking, savings, retirement, credit cards, everything. Once we're married, secrecy only creates problems. I almost choked on the air, but I smiled. Then I asked, as casually as I could, "Are you bringing all of yours too?" Daniel's hand froze for half a second over the rice. It was so small that another woman might have missed it. But I was no longer another woman. He looked up, smiled softly, and said, "Of course." Then his phone lit up beside his plate. A message flashed across the screen before he turned it over. I saw only one line. "Aubrey, he asked if you're still coming to family night tomorrow." I stared at Daniel's phone for 1 second too long, and in that 1 second, I watched the man I was supposed to marry become a stranger sitting 3 feet away from me with chopsticks in his hand and another life glowing on the screen between us. "Aubrey, he asked if you're still coming to family night tomorrow." Daniel flipped the phone over so fast that the movement looked guilty before his face did. Then he smiled. Not warmly. Not naturally. Just enough to cover the crack. "Work stuff," he said, reaching for the soy sauce like nothing had happened. I nodded slowly because I had already learned something terrifying about Daniel. He did not panic when he lied. He relaxed. He became smoother, softer, almost kinder, as if lying was not something he did under pressure, but something he had practiced until it felt like breathing. I lowered my eyes to the takeout container, pretending to push noodles around, while every nerve in my body screamed at me to stand up, throw the food across the kitchen, and ask him why some woman named Aubrey was texting him about family night. But I had no income anymore. No current job. A wedding in 3 weeks. A fiancé who wanted all my bank logins. And a hidden account proving he had built a whole system behind my back. So I swallowed the scream, smiled like a fool, and said, "Tomorrow night might be good for me to start packing for the honeymoon." His shoulders loosened immediately. "That's my girl," he said. I hated those words more than I hated the lie. That's my girl. As if I were sweet when I obeyed him. As if my fear had been mistaken for trust. That night, I waited until Daniel fell asleep before I went downstairs with my phone, my laptop, and the bank statement folded inside my robe pocket. I sat at the kitchen island where I had signed wedding contracts, addressed invitations, and let him edit my resignation letter, and I searched Aubrey Whitmore again with a colder mind. This time, I did not search like a scared bride. I searched like a woman trying to survive. I found her Instagram first. It was private, but the profile picture showed Aubrey standing on a beach with the 2 children, the little boy from the school and the toddler from the apartment, both wearing matching red swimsuits. Her bio said, "Mom, nurse, trying my best." No mention of Daniel. No obvious clue. No dramatic confession. Just a woman who looked tired in the same way I felt tired, though for completely different reasons. Then I searched Daniel's name with Aubrey's full name, and nothing came up. I searched old addresses, old property records, licenses, court filings, anything public enough to find at midnight with shaking hands and no legal training. At 1:18 in the morning, I found the first document that made me sit back. It was an old incorporation record for a small consulting company Daniel had registered 6 years earlier. The company was inactive now, but the registered mailing address was not his house. It was Aubrey's old apartment. I clicked through every page, my eyes burning, and then I saw another name listed as an authorized contact. Matthew R. Whitmore. Aubrey's last name, not Daniel's. But when I searched Matthew Whitmore, I found an obituary from 4 years earlier. He had died at 38. Car accident outside Murfreesboro. Survived by his wife, Aubrey, and 1 son. No toddler mentioned. My skin went cold. The little boy was old enough to be Matthew's child. But the toddler was not. The toddler was maybe 2. Maybe 3. Daniel and I had been together for 2.5 years. I sat there in the dark, staring at the screen, while the house made those quiet, settling sounds that used to comfort me and now felt like someone walking upstairs. Aubrey had lost a husband. Daniel had helped run a company connected to her address. There was a child born after that husband died. And Daniel was paying rent, school, maybe medical bills, while asking me to quit my job and combine every dollar I had left. This was not an affair that started recently. This was a hidden responsibility, a hidden obligation, maybe even a hidden child. I ran to the bathroom and threw up so quietly my throat hurt. In the morning, Daniel acted normal. That was the cruelest part. He showered, kissed my cheek, adjusted his cufflinks in the hallway mirror, and reminded me to bring my bank information to the financial planner at 4. "Don't stress," he said, rubbing my arm. "This is just us getting organized." Organized. That word followed me all day like a threat. I drove to Lauren's apartment with my documents in a tote bag and my wedding ring turned inward so I did not have to see it while I held the steering wheel. Lauren opened the door before I even knocked. She had coffee ready, a notebook on the table, and the expression of a woman who had already decided she was not going to let me romanticize danger. I showed her everything. The bank statement, the Aubrey text, the company record, the obituary, the timeline, the payments, Daniel's voicemail about my bank logins. Lauren read in silence, but her face changed when she saw the obituary date. "Claire," she said slowly, "that toddler could be his." I nodded, because hearing it out loud did not shock me anymore. It only confirmed the thing my body already knew. "I need to talk to Aubrey," I said. Lauren looked up fast. "No, you need a lawyer." "I need both." She pushed the notebook away and leaned toward me. "You are thinking like a woman who wants answers. You need to think like a woman whose money, credit, Housing and safety are all on the table. That sentence hit me harder than any accusation. Because she was right. I did not just need the truth. I needed protection from whatever Daniel had planned next. Lauren called her cousin, who worked as a paralegal for a family law attorney, and within an hour I was sitting in a small office downtown with a woman named Marisol Reyes, who had kind eyes and absolutely no patience for romantic excuses. She listened. She took notes. She asked dates, amounts, account details, wedding deposits, property ownership, my resignation timeline, and whether Daniel had ever asked me to sign anything I did not fully read. I told her no. Then I remembered the honeymoon paperwork. Daniel had booked the resort in Mexico, but 2 nights earlier, he had asked me to sign a travel insurance form and some shared reservation documents while I was half asleep on the couch. Marisol's pen stopped moving. What exactly did you sign? I don't know, I admitted, and the shame burned through my face. Daniel had handed me the pages with one finger already pointing to the signature lines, smiling like I was silly for squinting at the tiny print. Marisol did not scold me. She just said, "Get copies of everything." Then she told me something that made the room tilt. If Daniel had convinced me to quit my job before marriage, pushed me to combine accounts immediately after, and hidden substantial assets at the same time, then this was not just personal betrayal. It could become financial abuse. Especially if he tried to isolate me from my own funds. Especially if he created debt in both our names. Especially if I signed documents without understanding them. I thought of the financial planner meeting at 4. My stomach turned hard. What do I do today? I asked. Marisol looked me straight in the eyes. You do not give him your logins. You do not sign anything. You do not confront him alone. And you secure your documents somewhere he cannot access. By 3:30, I was back in Daniel's house, because some part of me still needed to finish the scene he had planned before I could rewrite it. The financial planner's office was on the 12th floor of a glass building downtown, all soft lighting, gray chairs, and framed photographs of smiling retired couples pretending money was simple. Daniel arrived 5 minutes after me, polished and calm, with a leather folder tucked under one arm. He kissed my cheek in the waiting room. I did not move. He noticed. Of course he noticed. You okay? He murmured. Just tired. His eyes held mine a moment too long. Then he smiled. The planner, a man named Eric, brought us into a conference room and began talking about household budgeting, shared goals, investment planning, tax advantages, and how newly married couples often benefit from full transparency. Daniel reached for my hand under the table. I let him hold it. His palm was warm. Mine was ice. Then Eric asked us to list our accounts. I gave him my checking account, my savings account, and my retirement provider, but when he asked for login access to sync balances, I smiled politely and said, I'm not comfortable doing that today. Daniel's hand tightened around mine. Just once. Fast. Painful. Then he released it. Eric paused, sensing the shift. Daniel laughed softly. Claire gets anxious with financial stuff, he said. That's actually why we're here. I turned my head and looked at him. Not angry. Not crying. Just looking. And for the first time, I saw irritation move across his face before he could hide it. I'm not anxious, I said. I just want to review everything first. Daniel's voice stayed smooth, but his eyes sharpened. We talked about this. No, I said. You talked about it. The room went silent. Eric glanced down at his tablet, suddenly very interested in neutrality. Daniel leaned back slowly, then opened his leather folder. That's fine, he said, still smiling. Let's review everything. He slid a packet across the table toward me. At the top, in bold letters, was a title I had never seen before. Postnuptial Financial Agreement. My mouth went dry. Not prenuptial. Postnuptial. After the wedding. Daniel had prepared papers for me to sign once I was already his wife, already unemployed, already financially folded into his life. I turned the first page. The language was dense, but one sentence stood out so clearly it felt written in blood. Both parties agreed that all premarital and separately held assets belonging to Daniel M. Carter shall remain his sole property, while Claire Bennett agrees to contribute all available liquid funds towards shared household obligations during the first 24 months of marriage. I read it again, then again. Daniel had protected everything he had hidden, and he had positioned everything I had left to become shared household obligations. I looked up at him, and his smile finally disappeared. "Where did you get this?" I asked. He did not answer right away. Then Eric cleared his throat and said, carefully, "Mr. Carter sent the draft over this morning." This morning, after Aubrey's text. After I asked whether Daniel was bringing all of his accounts too. After he realized I might be looking. Daniel leaned toward me, lowering his voice like we were alone. "Claire, don't embarrass us in front of people." And that was when the last soft piece of me toward him went quiet. I placed the packet back on the table. Then I reached into my purse, pulled out the folded bank statement, and set it beside his agreement. Daniel's face changed before he touched it. He knew. He knew exactly what it was. I leaned closer, keeping my voice low enough that only he and Eric could hear. "Who is Aubrey Whitmore?" For the first time since I had met him, Daniel Carter had no perfect answer. He stared at me, then at the statement, then at the door. And right before he could speak, his phone rang on the table. The caller ID lit up bright against the dark screen. Aubrey Whitmore. Daniel's phone kept ringing on the conference table, and for a few seconds none of us moved, because that name on the screen had turned the room into something smaller, colder, and much more dangerous than a financial planning appointment. Aubrey Whitmore. The name pulsed against the glass, bright and undeniable, while Daniel stared at it with the kind of frozen anger people show only when their private world has been dragged into daylight before they can control the room. Eric, the financial planner, looked from Daniel to me, then down at the bank statement I had placed beside the postnuptial agreement, and I could see the exact moment he realized he had been invited into something far uglier than asset planning. Daniel reached for the phone, but I put my hand over it first. I did not grab it. I did not act dramatic. I simply placed my palm on top of the screen and looked at him across the table, letting him understand that the woman he had brought there was no longer the same woman who had clicked send on her resignation letter while he held her hand. "Answer it," I said. His face tightened. "Claire, this is not the place." "No," I said, keeping my voice calm even though my ribs felt like they were closing around my lungs. "This is exactly the place, because you brought me here to discuss transparency." Eric shifted in his chair, clearly wishing the carpet would open beneath him, but he did not interrupt, and that tiny silence gave me more strength than he probably realized. Daniel's phone stopped ringing. Then, almost immediately, a text appeared. "Aubrey, Daniel, please call me. Evan is asking why you missed family night." Evan. The boy from the school. The boy with the card. The boy whose voice I could still hear through the closed windows of my car, calling out about Mr. Daniel like Daniel was not a secret, not to him, not to that little family in Franklin, not to the child who had thanked him for paying tuition. Daniel snatched the phone from under my hand and locked the screen. His smile was gone now. Not cracked. Gone. "Eric," he said, without looking away from me, "could you give us a minute?" Eric stood so quickly his chair rolled back into the wall. "Of course," he said, gathering nothing because he clearly wanted no part of whatever came next. "I'll step out." The door closed behind him with a soft click. Daniel waited one breath, maybe two, then leaned across the table and spoke in a low voice that had no warmth left in it. "You had no right to go through my private financial records." I almost laughed, but it would have come out broken. "You mailed them to my house." I did not mail them. That answer landed harder than I expected. For the first time all day, confusion cut through my anger. I looked at the statement, then back at him, trying to understand what he had just admitted without meaning to admit. If Daniel had not sent it, then someone else had. Someone who knew about the account. Someone who knew my name. Someone who wanted me to see it before the wedding. Then who did? I asked. Daniel's eyes flicked toward the door, then back to me, and in that tiny movement I saw something I had not seen before. Fear. Not guilt. Not sadness. Fear. "Claire," he said, slower now, choosing each word with surgical care, There are parts of my life you do not understand, and if you keep digging, you're going to hurt people who have nothing to do with this. That was when I realized he still thought he could make me feel responsible for his lies. Even sitting there with his hidden account, his secret payments, his surprise legal agreement, and another woman's name glowing on his phone, he was still trying to hand me the emotional bill. "You mean Aubrey?" I asked. His jaw flexed. "You do not know anything about her. I know you pay her rent. I help her. I know you pay for Evan's school." His face changed. Just enough. The name had hit him. "And I know there's a toddler," I added, quieter now, because saying it almost took the breath out of me. A little girl, maybe 2 or 3, who was not mentioned in Aubrey's husband's obituary. Daniel stood up so abruptly the chair scraped against the floor. "Stop." The word came out sharp enough to make my body flinch before my mind could stop it, and Daniel saw that flinch, saw the damage he had done, then immediately softened his face like he could put the mask back on if he moved fast enough. "I'm sorry," he said, sitting again, lowering his voice. "I'm sorry, baby. I just need you to understand that this is complicated." There it was. Complicated. The word people use when the simple truth makes them look unforgivable. I pushed the post-nuptial agreement toward him with 2 fingers. "What part of this is complicated?" He glanced down at the paper, then exhaled through his nose like I was being difficult, like I had embarrassed him by reading the trap before stepping into it. "That agreement protects both of us." "No, Daniel," I said, and my voice surprised me because it did not shake. "It protects you from me while giving you access to me." His eyes narrowed. "You quit your job because you were miserable." "I quit because you spent months convincing me that depending on you is love." His expression hardened again, and for one strange, terrible moment I understood that the gentle version of Daniel had only ever existed when I was easy to manage. When I was grateful, he was tender. When I was doubtful, he was wounded. When I was obedient, he was loving. But when I asked clear questions in a room with witnesses nearby, he became someone else entirely. He leaned back, folded his hands on the table, and said, "Do you really want to throw away our entire future over money I set aside before we were married?" "No," I said. "I want to know why you hid it while asking my mother for wedding money." Something ugly flashed across his face. "Your mother offered. You accepted. She wanted to help her daughter. And you let her help because you wanted me to believe you were stretched thin." Daniel looked away then, and that small retreat told me more than any confession could have. I stood up. My legs felt weak, but I stood anyway, because staying seated across from him suddenly felt like agreeing to negotiate my own disappearance. "I'm leaving," I said. He stood too. "Claire, sit down." "No. You are emotional right now." "I am informed right now." His hand closed around my wrist before I reached the door. Not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to remind me that he was stronger, taller, and very used to people obeying him when he lowered his voice. I looked down at his hand. Then I looked up at him. "Let go." For 1 second, he did not. And in that 1 second, I saw my future if I married him. I saw myself explaining away every grip, every locked account, every sudden silence, every document I had signed because I was tired. Every humiliating call to my mother asking for money while my husband's real life lived comfortably 28 minutes away. Then the door opened. Eric stood there with Marisol, my lawyer. I had texted her from under the table the moment Daniel asked Eric to leave, sending only 3 words. "Please come now." Marisol's eyes dropped to Daniel's hand on my wrist. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "Mr. Carter," she said, "release her." Daniel let go immediately. Then he smiled at Marisol like a man meeting a guest at church. "This is a private matter," he said. "Not anymore," she replied. I do not remember every detail of the next 10 minutes, because fear and adrenaline can turn a room into flashes. Marisol collected the post-nuptial agreement. Eric confirmed, carefully and nervously, that Daniel had submitted the draft that morning. Daniel insisted I had misunderstood everything. I said almost nothing. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I was finally beginning to understand that arguing with a skilled liar is like pouring water into sand. It disappears, and then you stand there empty. Marisol walked me to the elevator while Daniel remained in the conference room, his phone pressed to his ear now, his back turned toward the glass wall as if privacy could still save him. When the elevator doors closed, my knees almost gave out. Marisol pressed the button for the lobby and said, "You need to stay somewhere else tonight. I have things at his house. We will get them with someone present. My wedding dress is there." She looked at me gently then, and somehow that nearly broke me more than Daniel's lies. "Claire," she said, "right now we are not worried about the dress." I nodded, but tears came anyway, silent and hot, because the dress still mattered in the stupidest human part of me. It was not just fabric. It was the version of my life I had been promised. It was my mother crying in the bridal shop. It was Lauren taking pictures while I turned in front of the mirror. It was the aisle, the music, the vows, the house, the future, the relief of finally believing I did not have to carry everything alone. And now all of that was sitting upstairs in Daniel's house like evidence from a crime scene. Lauren picked me up outside the building 15 minutes later, and the second I got into her car, she locked the doors and drove without asking questions. I sat in the passenger seat with my purse on my lap, staring at my bare wrist where Daniel's fingers had been. No bruise, no mark, nothing I could photograph, nothing I could point to and say, "See, this is where love changed into control." But I felt it. That night at Lauren's apartment, I finally called my mother. I expected anger. I expected panic. I expected the kind of painful silence mothers use when they are trying not to say, "I knew something was wrong." Instead, when I told her I had quit my job because Daniel pressured me, that he had hidden money, that he had prepared a financial agreement behind my back, and that there was another woman with children involved, my mother became very quiet and said, "I'm coming over." "Mom, it's late." "I'm coming over," she repeated. She arrived 40 minutes later in sweatpants, no makeup, carrying a folder full of old receipts, bank records, and the printed confirmation for the reception deposit she had paid. Then she placed one more thing on Lauren's kitchen table. A photograph. It was from my engagement party 6 months earlier. Daniel stood near the back patio with a drink in one hand, smiling at someone just outside the frame. In the far corner of the photo, half hidden behind my cousin's shoulder, was a woman holding a toddler. Aubrey. My mother tapped the photo with one finger. "I didn't know who she was," she said, her voice low. "But I remembered her because Daniel looked terrified when he saw her." The room went still. Lauren leaned closer. I picked up the photograph with both hands, staring at Aubrey's face, at the little girl on her hip, at Daniel in the background looking not loving, not confused, not innocent, but trapped. My mother swallowed hard. "There's something else," she said. I looked up. She reached into the folder and pulled out a small white envelope, creased at the edges. "This came to my house 2 days ago," she said. "I was going to show you after the planner meeting because I didn't want to scare you." My fingers went numb before I even opened it. Inside was a copy of a birth certificate. A little girl's name. Her mother listed as Aubrey Whitmore. And on the line where the father's name should have been, someone had written by hand in black ink, "Ask Daniel why he paid to keep this blank." I stared at that birth certificate until the words stopped looking like words and became something heavier, something that pressed against my chest with the quiet force of a door locking from the outside. "Ask Daniel why he paid to keep this blank." There was no father listed, no signature, no official confirmation, just an empty space where a man's name should have been, and a handwritten sentence from someone who clearly knew more about Daniel's life than I did after 2.5 years of sleeping beside him. For a moment, nobody spoke. Lauren stood near the kitchen counter with her arms folded tightly across her chest. My mother sat beside me with one hand covering her mouth, and I held the paper like it might burn me if I let my skin understand what my eyes had already seen. The little girl had a name. Mia Grace Whitmore. Date of birth, almost 3 years earlier. Which meant Aubrey had been pregnant right around the time Daniel and I met at that charity dinner downtown, back when he looked at me across a table full of donors and told me he admired women who worked hard for everything they had. I remembered that night with a sudden, sick clarity. Daniel had worn a gray suit. He had asked questions that made me feel seen. He had laughed softly when I said I did not trust men who called themselves nice guys, and then he had spent the next 2 years becoming exactly the kind of man who never needed to call himself nice because everyone else did it for him. My mother touched my arm. "Claire," she whispered, "do you think that child is his?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to protect at least one small piece of the life I thought I had. But the timeline, the money, the secrecy, the family night text, and Daniel's fear in that photograph had already answered before I could lie to myself again. "I think he's been paying for silence," I said. The sentence came out flat, almost emotionless, because there are moments when pain becomes too large for tears and your body simply shuts off the parts that would make you collapse. Lauren pulled out a chair and sat across from me. "Then we need to know who sent this." She was right, but my mind was moving somewhere darker. The bank statement had come to me. The birth certificate had gone to my mother. Whoever was sending these things knew my address, my mother's address, the wedding timeline, Daniel's hidden account, Aubrey's child, and exactly how to make sure the truth reached us before the ceremony. That was not a random warning. That was a plan. I picked up my phone, scrolled to Daniel's name, and stared at the last message he had sent after I left the planner's office. "You misunderstood everything. Come home and we'll talk like adults." There was another one sent 20 minutes later. "Do not let Lauren and your mother poison you against me." And then one more, colder than the others. "Remember, you don't have a job right now. Making emotional decisions would be reckless." That was the message that finally broke something open in me. Not the affair. Not the money. Not even the birth certificate. It was that sentence, because Daniel had pushed me out of my job, then used my unemployment as proof that I should obey him. I placed the phone on the table, screen up, so my mother and Lauren could read it. My mother's face changed. I had seen my mother angry before, but this was different, because this was the quiet anger of a woman watching her daughter recognize a trap after the door had already swung shut. She reached for my hand. "You are not going back there alone," she said. "I know. And you are not marrying him." I looked down at the engagement ring on my finger, the diamond catching the kitchen light like nothing ugly had ever touched it. "I know," I said again, but this time my voice cracked. Because knowing something and surviving it are not the same thing. The next morning, Marisol arranged for a sheriff's deputy to meet us at Daniel's house while I collected my documents, clothes, laptop, medication, and anything else I could not leave behind. I expected Daniel to be furious. I expected him to stand in the doorway with that wounded expression, acting like I had turned strangers against him. But when we pulled up to the house, his SUV was gone. The driveway looked too clean. The porch flowers I had watered 3 days earlier were still bright and innocent. My wedding dress was still upstairs. That almost made me turn around. Not because I wanted the dress, but because walking inside meant admitting that the home I had imagined becoming ours had never belonged to me, not even emotionally, because every room had been arranged around Daniel's comfort and my compliance. The deputy waited near the entryway while Lauren came upstairs with me. I moved fast. Jeans, sweaters, toiletries, documents, chargers, shoes, the fireproof box, the framed photo of my grandmother, the earrings my mother had bought me for the wedding. Because some part of me refused to let Daniel keep even the ghosts of women who had loved me better than he did. Then I opened the closet. The dress hung there in its garment bag, ivory and still, like a version of myself I had outgrown overnight. Lauren stood beside me without saying anything. "I can't leave it," I whispered. "Then don't." I carried the dress downstairs myself, which felt ridiculous and sacred at the same time, and I was halfway through the living room when I noticed Daniel's leather folder sitting on the coffee table. The same one from the planner's office. The one he had used to bring that post-nuptial agreement like a loaded weapon wrapped in legal language. I knew I should not touch it. Then I saw my name printed on the top page inside. I looked toward the deputy, then at Lauren. She gave me a look that said, "Be careful," but she did not stop me. I opened the folder. Inside were copies of documents I had never seen before. A household budget showing my savings listed as available transition funds. A draft schedule for selling my car after the honeymoon. A note about adding me as an authorized user on one of Daniel's credit cards, not as an equal account holder. And then, near the back, a printed email from Daniel to an attorney whose name I did not recognize. The subject line read, Post-wedding asset protection and dependent spouse planning. Dependent spouse. The phrase made my stomach turn. I scanned the email quickly, my eyes jumping from line to line, and even though some of the language was careful, the meaning was clear enough. Daniel had asked how to protect his separate assets while creating a reasonable structure where I would manage household responsibilities during a temporary career break. He had written that I was emotionally exhausted from work and eager to step into a more supportive home role. He had described my resignation like it had been my dream. He had turned my burnout into a legal narrative before I even knew I needed defending. Then I saw one final paragraph that made the room narrow around me. There may be a separate support matter involving a minor child, but I do not want that issue exposed during marital planning, as it could create unnecessary conflict before the ceremony. I read it twice. A minor child. Not Aubrey. Not Evan. A minor child. Mia. Daniel knew. Daniel had always known. I took photos of every page before putting the folder back exactly as I found it, because Marisol had already warned me not to remove anything that could start a fight over property, but she had also told me to document what I saw if it involved me. As we left the house, my phone started ringing. Daniel. I did not answer. Then a text came through. You went into my private files. Big mistake. My hands went cold, but Lauren took the phone from me before I could respond. No, she said. Not one word. We drove straight to Marisol's office. I showed her the photographs from the folder, the birth certificate, the texts, and the message about my big mistake, and for the first time since this began, Marisol's calm face tightened. He is escalating, she said. That word made everything feel real in a way betrayal had not. Escalating. As in, not finished. As in, the man who had once kissed my forehead while helping me resign from my job was now angry because I had found the paperwork proving why he wanted me weak. Marisol told me to freeze my credit immediately, move my remaining savings into an account at a new bank, change passwords, revoke any shared access, and send formal written notice canceling all wedding-related financial commitments where my name appeared. She also told me to document every contact from Daniel and not to meet him privately under any circumstance. By noon, I had frozen my credit. By 1, I had changed every password I could remember. By 2, I had called the venue, the florist, the photographer, and the resort, explaining in the most humiliatingly simple terms that the wedding was canceled and that no charges should be accepted without my direct approval. Each call felt like removing a hook from my skin. Painful. Necessary. Bloody in a way nobody else could see. The worst call was to my old boss. I sat in Lauren's car outside Marisol's office, staring at the company number on my phone, feeling the full weight of my pride pressing down on me. I had left with a polished resignation letter Daniel helped me write. I had let people believe I was stepping into some softer, happier chapter. Now I was calling to ask whether there was any chance my position, or any position, was still open. My boss answered on the third ring. Her voice was cool, professional, familiar in the way a hard chair is familiar after you have sat in it for years. I explained as much as I could without handing her my entire shame. There was a pause. Then she said, Claire, your role has not been filled yet, but I need to be honest with you. Coming back would require a formal review with HR. I understand, I said quickly. And I need to ask something. My throat tightened. Okay. Did someone pressure you to resign? I shut my eyes. For a second, I almost protected Daniel again. That instinct terrified me because even after everything, my first reflex was still to make the truth smaller so other people would not think badly of him, or worse, think badly of me. Yes, I said finally. My fiancé did. Another pause. Then her voice changed. Not warm exactly, but human. Send me an email today. Keep it factual. I'll see what I can do. When I hung up, I cried harder than I had cried all week. Not because my job was saved. It was not yet. But because one piece of the world had not closed its door completely. That evening, Aubrey called me. I do not know how she got my number. Maybe from Daniel's phone. Maybe from whoever had mailed the documents. Maybe from a chain of secrets I still did not understand. Her name appeared on my screen while Lauren and my mother were arguing softly about whether I should eat soup or toast, as if food could solve a life that had split down the middle. I stared at the phone until it stopped ringing. Then she texted, "Claire, please. I think we are both being lied to." I read the message out loud. My mother sat down slowly. Lauren's eyes narrowed. Aubrey sent another text before I could decide what to do. "I did not know he was making you quit your job. I did not know about the wedding until last month. Last month. Daniel and I had been engaged for 8 months. The invitations had gone out. The venue was paid. My mother had chosen her dress. And Aubrey, the woman with the child whose birth certificate had no father, claimed she had only learned about the wedding last month." I called Marisol before responding. She told me not to meet Aubrey alone, not to share financial information, and not to assume Aubrey was either an enemy or a friend until we knew more. So I texted back one sentence. "We can speak tomorrow with my attorney present." Aubrey replied almost instantly. "Good. Bring the bank statement. I'll bring the DNA paperwork Daniel made me sign." I read that sentence 3 times. DNA paperwork. Daniel had not just hidden money. He had not just hidden a child. He had created documents, agreements, stories, pressure points, and separate versions of reality for every woman who had trusted him. And right when I thought the night could not get worse, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Daniel. No apology. No explanation. Just a photo. It showed my wedding dress lying across his bed. The dress I had carried out that morning. The dress that was supposed to be in Lauren's guest room closet. Under the photo, he had written, "You forgot something important at home. Come get it yourself." For several seconds, I could not understand what I was looking at, because the dress in Daniel's photo was not just lying across his bed, it was spread out carefully, almost tenderly. Like he had staged it to remind me of the woman I had almost become for him. The ivory skirt spilled over the dark comforter. The sleeves were smoothed flat. The veil was folded beside it. And right there, near the bodice, I saw the small pearl hairpin my mother had clipped into my hair during the fitting, the one she said made me look like myself, only softer. I stood in Lauren's kitchen with my phone in my hand, feeling my stomach drop lower and lower, because I knew I had carried that dress out of Daniel's house that morning. Lauren had watched me carry it. The deputy had opened the front door while I held it against my chest. We had placed it in the back seat of Lauren's car. Then we had driven away. So if Daniel had it now, that meant he had either followed us, gone through Lauren's car, or sent someone to take it. And somehow, that frightened me more than the hidden money. Because money could be frozen. Accounts could be moved. Documents could be copied. But this was different. This was him reaching into my temporary safe place and proving he could still touch something personal whenever he wanted. Lauren read the message over my shoulder and went completely still. My mother whispered, "How did he get that?" I did not answer because every possible answer made the room feel smaller. Then Daniel sent another text. "You're making this uglier than it needs to be." A third message came before I could breathe. "Come alone, and we can fix everything before people get hurt." People. Not me. Not us. People. That was how Daniel always made his threats sound responsible. Lauren took the phone from my hand and placed it on the table like it might explode. "We're calling Marisol," she said. My mother was already dialing. I sat down slowly because my legs had started shaking, and I hated that they were shaking, hated that Daniel could still reach into my body from miles away and make it react before my mind caught up. Marisol answered on the second ring. Lauren put her on speaker, and after she read the messages out loud, there was a silence on the line that told me this had crossed another line. "Do not respond," Marisol said. "Do not go there. Screenshot everything, including the photo, and I want you to check whether anything else is missing from the car or apartment." Lauren grabbed her keys and ran downstairs to the parking lot while my mother stayed with me, one hand resting on my shoulder, not squeezing, not fussing, just reminding me I was not alone in the room anymore. When Lauren came back, her face told us before her mouth did. "My passenger window was not broken," she said, breathing hard. But the back door was not fully latched, and the dress is gone from the closet bag. My mother closed her eyes. I felt something cold move through me. Not panic this time. Recognition. Daniel did not want the dress. He wanted me to know he could take it. He wanted me to feel unsafe enough to run back toward the familiar danger, because sometimes control does not need a locked door if fear can make you walk through it yourself. Marisol told us to file a police report and send every message to her immediately, and by the time Lauren finished speaking with an officer, my shame had started hardening into something I could finally stand on. Because for days, I had been asking myself how I had missed the signs, how I had believed the soft voice, how I had let a man talk me out of my job, my privacy, my judgment, and almost my future. But watching him use my wedding dress like bait made one thing painfully clear. This was never about me being foolish. This was about him being patient. The next morning, I met Aubrey in Marisol's office. I expected to hate her. I am ashamed to admit that, but it is true. On the drive there, I imagined some glamorous secret woman who had known everything, who had laughed at me from the edges of Daniel's life, who had accepted his money while I folded wedding programs and tried to become the kind of wife he said he wanted. But Aubrey was not glamorous. She looked exhausted. She sat in the conference room wearing jeans, a navy cardigan, and no makeup, with a diaper bag at her feet and dark circles under her eyes that made her look older than she probably was. When I walked in, she stood too quickly. "Claire," she said, and my name in her mouth sounded careful, like something fragile. I did not hug her. I did not smile. I sat across from her, placed my folder on the table, and waited for Marisol to begin. Aubrey's hands trembled as she opened her own envelope. Inside were printed text messages, copies of checks, medical invoices, and a document titled Private Paternity Resolution Agreement, which made Marisol lean forward before Aubrey even explained it. "He told me signing it would protect Mia," Aubrey said, her voice low and tight. "He said if his name went on the birth certificate, his family would drag us through court, and he said he could support her better privately." I stared at her. "His family?" Aubrey nodded, confused by my reaction. "He told me his parents were extremely wealthy and controlling." A bitter laugh rose in my throat before I could stop it. Daniel's parents lived in a ranch house outside Knoxville, owned 2 rescue dogs, and still mailed him grocery store coupons because his mother thought everyone paid too much for cereal. Aubrey looked at my face, and the confusion in hers turned slowly into horror. "He lied about that too," she whispered. Marisol lifted one hand gently. "Start from the beginning." So Aubrey did. She told us she had met Daniel 7 years earlier, when he and her late husband Matthew were trying to start a consulting business together. Matthew trusted him. Aubrey trusted him because Matthew did. After Matthew died, Daniel stepped in like a blessing disguised as a man, helping her with insurance forms, school applications, lease issues, and all the practical things grief had made impossible to face alone. "He never pressured me at first," Aubrey said. "That's the part people don't understand. He just showed up." I understood that too well. Daniel showed up beautifully. He learned the shape of your exhaustion, then offered himself as the answer. Aubrey said the relationship became physical almost a year after Matthew died, when she was lonely, broke, terrified, and ashamed of needing help. When she got pregnant with Mia, Daniel cried. Actually cried. He told her he loved her, told her he would take care of everything, told her they needed to be smart until he settled family complications that never seemed to end. Then, when Mia was born, he paid for the hospital balance, the apartment, the therapy clinic, and Evan's tuition, but only after Aubrey signed agreements saying she would not pursue formal child support without mediation. "He said court would ruin all of us," she said. I looked down at the bank statement in my folder. "No," I said quietly. "Court would ruin him." Aubrey covered her face with one hand. For the first time, I stopped seeing her as the woman on the other side of my betrayal and started seeing the pattern Daniel had used on both of us. With me, he used romance and marriage. With Aubrey, he used grief and children. Different doors. Same cage. Then Marisol asked the question I had been afraid to ask. "When did you learn Daniel was engaged?" Aubrey swallowed hard. Last month. Mia was sick, and Daniel missed 2 days he promised to help. So I went by his office because he was not answering. A woman in the lobby was talking about his wedding registry. I felt the air leave my chest. Aubrey looked at me, eyes wet. I asked him that night, and he told me you were unstable, that the wedding was complicated, that he was marrying you for business reasons because you had some family money tied to property. My mother made a small sound beside me. I almost smiled from the absurdity of it. Family money. My mother had given him $3,000 for the reception deposit after working double shifts at the hospital for 20 years and treating clearance racks like treasure hunts. Daniel had made me sound rich to Aubrey and dependent to his lawyer. He had made Aubrey sound dangerous to me and vulnerable to himself. He had built whatever story each person needed to hear so he could keep standing in the middle untouched. Aubrey slid one more page across the table. "This is why I mailed the bank statement," she said. My eyes lifted to hers. "You sent it?" She nodded. "I found the account last month after he left his laptop open. I did not understand everything, but I saw your name in his calendar, the planner meeting, the attorney emails, and the wedding date, and I knew he was going to do something to you." My throat tightened. "And the birth certificate?" "That was me too," she said, then looked at my mother. "I'm sorry I sent it to your mom. I did not know who else would make sure Claire saw it." My mother looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "You did the right thing." Aubrey started crying then, not dramatically, not loudly, just a quiet collapse of someone who had been holding herself together with tape and fear for too long. But the relief did not last. Because Marisol picked up the paternity agreement, read 2 more pages, then looked at Aubrey with a sharp stillness. "Did Daniel ever ask you to sign anything in the last month?" Aubrey wiped her cheek. "Yes. He said he needed updated paperwork for Mia's school and medical authorization. Do you have a copy?" Aubrey nodded and pulled another packet from her bag. Marisol read the first page, then the second. Then she looked at me, and something in her expression made my stomach tighten before she even spoke. "This is not school paperwork," she said. Aubrey leaned forward. "What is it?" Marisol placed the packet flat on the table and turned it toward us. "It appears to give Daniel temporary decision-making authority over Mia in the event of your incapacity." Aubrey went pale. "I did not know that." Marisol kept reading, her voice controlled but colder now. "And there is language here suggesting you consent to resolving all support disputes privately, outside formal court action, with financial penalties for disclosure." Aubrey's hands flew to her mouth. "I signed that." Marisol nodded once. "We will deal with it, but you need your own attorney immediately." The room felt airless. Daniel had not just lied to both of us. He had been tightening both cages at the same time. Mine through marriage, hers through motherhood. And now that both cages were opening, he was reaching for whatever he could still control. My phone buzzed. Everyone looked at it. Daniel again. This time, it was not a text. It was an email. The subject line read, "Final chance to avoid public embarrassment." I opened it because Marisol told me to, and the message was short enough to read in one breath. "Claire, if you continue involving lawyers and strangers, I will make sure your employer understands why you really resigned. I will pursue damages for canceled wedding contracts. And I will tell your family exactly how much of your financial situation you hid from them. Aubrey has already caused enough damage by lying to you. Do not make the same mistake she did. Come to the house tonight, alone, or tomorrow everyone finds out who you really are." I read it once, then again. The old Claire would have panicked. She would have wondered what he meant, wondered what he could twist, wondered whether silence would be safer than truth. But sitting there beside my mother, across from Aubrey, with Marisol reading every word over my shoulder, I finally understood the one thing Daniel had counted on me never learning. Secrets only protect the person who benefits from them. So I looked at Marisol and said, "Send it to my boss, my mother, the police, whoever needs to see it." Daniel wanted to expose me. Fine. I was done being hidden. Marisol took a slow breath, then nodded. "We document everything." By evening, the wedding was officially canceled. Not quietly, not politely, not with some vague little message about personal reasons. My mother called the relatives. Lauren handled the bridesmaids. I emailed the venue with written confirmation from my attorney. Aubrey contacted a lawyer for herself and Mia. My old boss confirmed HR would meet with me the following Monday. Piece by piece, the life Daniel thought he had cornered began moving without his permission. And maybe that was why he finally lost control. At 9:14 that night, while I was sitting on Lauren's couch under a blanket, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a video. I did not want to open it, but I did. The video showed Daniel standing in the church where we were supposed to get married, the aisle lights glowing softly behind him, my wedding dress hanging from the altar rail like a ghost. His voice was calm. Too calm. "Claire," he said, looking directly into the camera, "you can still fix this." Then the camera tilted down. On the floor beside him were two envelopes. One had my name written on it. The other had Aubrey's. Daniel smiled slightly, and my blood went cold. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "one of you is going to lose everything." I watched Daniel's video 3 times, not because I wanted to, but because my brain kept refusing to believe that the man who had once cried during our engagement dinner was now standing in our wedding church with my stolen dress hanging behind him like a warning flag. The church looked exactly as it had looked during our rehearsal visit, with the polished wooden pews, the soft gold lights near the altar, and the long center aisle where I had once imagined walking toward him while my mother tried not to cry. Now that same aisle looked like a trap. The dress moved slightly in the air conditioning behind him, and somehow that tiny movement made the whole thing feel alive, like my almost marriage had become a ghost Daniel was using to scare me back into silence. Lauren stood beside me with one hand over her mouth. My mother whispered a prayer under her breath. Aubrey, who had stayed at Marisol's office after our meeting because she was too shaken to drive, watched the video with her face drained of color. Marisol did not react emotionally. She simply held out her hand and said, "Send it to me now." I sent it. Then I looked at Aubrey. For the first time, neither of us looked like rivals, because Daniel had finally made the truth too obvious for shame to divide us. He was not choosing between women. He was choosing which woman would be easier to frighten. Marisol called the police first, then the church office, then a private attorney she knew who handled custody emergencies, while Lauren sat beside me on the couch and kept repeating, "You are not going there, you are not going there, you are not going there," as if my fear might suddenly grow legs and carry me back to him. But I was not tempted to go. That surprised me. The old Claire might have gone, not because she trusted him, but because she would have believed she could calm him down, explain herself gently, stop the damage, protect everyone, and somehow clean up the mess without making anyone angry. That night, I finally understood that calming a controlling man does not make you safe. It only teaches him which threat works best. By midnight, 2 officers met Marisol and the church administrator at the building, and I stayed at Lauren's apartment with my mother, Aubrey, and a silence so thick I could barely breathe through it. Daniel was not at the church when they arrived. Of course he was not. Men like Daniel do not always stand in the fire they start. They light the match, step away, and wait to see who runs toward the flames. The officers found my dress still hanging from the altar rail. They found the 2 envelopes on the floor beneath it. And inside those envelopes, they found the final shape of Daniel's plan. Mine contained printed emails he had drafted but not sent yet, addressed to my old employer, my mother, several wedding vendors, and 2 relatives whose opinions Daniel knew would wound me if they turned against me. In those emails, he painted me as unstable, financially irresponsible, deceptive about my savings, and emotionally unfit to make decisions. He attached private texts I had sent during burnout, the kind where I said things like, "I can't do this anymore," and stripped them of context until they looked like evidence that I was falling apart. Aubrey's envelope was worse. Hers contained copies of the papers she had signed, a letter threatening to pursue temporary custody rights if she continued defamatory behavior, and a printed summary describing her as grief-impaired, financially dependent, and hostile. Daniel had built 2 cages using 2 different stories. For me, he planned to make independence look like instability. For Aubrey, he planned to make motherhood look like incompetence. And when Marisol read those documents aloud over the phone, I felt something in me go very still. Not numb. Clear. Daniel had counted on my fear of embarrassment. He had counted on Aubrey's fear of losing Mia. He had counted on my mother's fear of scandal, Lauren's fear for my safety, and everyone's instinct to keep ugly family things private. But privacy had been his hiding place. So the next morning, before Daniel could send anything, Marisol sent formal notices of preservation to everyone involved, including his attorney, the financial planner, the church, the vendors, and my employer, stating that Daniel's communications were part of an ongoing harassment and financial coercion matter. She did not exaggerate. She did not dramatize. She simply put the truth on paper before he could poison it. My HR meeting happened that same Monday. I walked into that office wearing the only blazer I had packed, with tired eyes, shaking hands, and a folder full of facts I wished no stranger ever had to see. My boss sat across from me with someone from HR, and for the first few minutes I explained everything like I was reporting on someone else's life. The resignation pressure, the hidden financial agreement, the texts, the threats, the police report. The reason I needed to come back, not as a woman asking for pity, but as an employee who had made a serious decision under pressure and was trying to repair the damage before it became permanent. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then my boss folded her hands and said, "Your position is still open, and we would like you to return." I did not cry until I reached the parking lot. Not because a job fixes everything. It does not. But that job was my first real door out of Daniel's version of my life. Aubrey filed for formal child support and paternity testing that same week with her own attorney. Daniel fought it at first, loudly and arrogantly, but once the documents, payment history, private agreements, and threatening messages were placed in front of people who were not emotionally attached to his charming voice, his power started shrinking very quickly. That was the part nobody tells you about men like Daniel. They can seem enormous inside the private world they control. But outside that world, under plain light, with dates, records, witnesses, and women who finally stop protecting them, they become much smaller than they looked in the dark. The wedding was canceled completely. Some deposits were lost. Some vendors showed mercy. My mother insisted she did not care about the money, but I cared, so I paid her back slowly after I returned to work, even though she told me every month to stop sending checks. Daniel tried to contact me for a while. At first, he apologized. Then he accused. Then he begged. Then he threatened to sue. Then, finally, he went quiet. His silence did not feel peaceful right away. At first, it felt like waiting for thunder. But little by little, the quiet became mine. I moved into a small apartment with thin walls, ugly beige carpet, and a kitchen so narrow I could touch both counters at once. And I loved that place more than I had ever loved Daniel's beautiful house, because every bill had my name on it and every key belonged to me. The wedding dress stayed in a box for almost 6 months. I could not sell it. I could not look at it. Then one Saturday morning, my mother came over with coffee, Lauren brought scissors, and Aubrey arrived with Mia on her hip, shy and nervous at the door like she still was not sure whether she belonged in my life. We did not destroy the dress in some dramatic revenge scene. That would have been too easy. Instead, we took it to a nonprofit that repurposed wedding gowns into burial garments for babies whose parents never got to take them home, and when the volunteer thanked me, I stood there in the parking lot afterward and cried so hard my mother had to hold me up. Because for the first time, the dress was not bait. It was not evidence. It was not the ghost of a future Daniel stole from me. It became something gentle, something useful, something he could not touch anymore. Aubrey and I are not best friends, and I will not pretend trauma magically turned us into sisters. Some days, seeing her still hurts in ways I do not know how to explain, because she is connected to the worst betrayal of my life and also to the warning that saved me from marrying it. But we are kind to each other. We tell each other the truth. And when Mia's paternity test came back exactly as we expected, Aubrey sent me only one message. "You helped me stop being scared." I stared at that message for a long time before I answered. "You helped me wake up." It has been almost a year now. I am still rebuilding my savings. I still check my credit report every month. I still get nervous when someone says they only want what is best for me, because I learned the hard way that control often introduces itself as care. But I am working again. I am living alone. I am answering my mother's calls. I am telling Lauren the truth even when it makes me look foolish. And I have promised myself that no future love will ever require me to become smaller, quieter, poorer, or easier to manage. Daniel once told me marriage meant having no secrets. He was wrong. Marriage means having no traps. And the woman I am now would rather walk away from a beautiful promise than sign her name under a life where freedom is treated like a problem. The last thing I heard about Daniel was from Marisol months later, when she told me his firm had opened an internal review after receiving documentation tied to the threats and undisclosed financial arrangements. She did not know what would happen. Honestly, neither do I. Some endings do not arrive with justice wrapped in a bow. Sometimes the real ending is just the morning you wake up, make your own coffee, check your own bank account, lock your own front door, and realize nobody has permission to call that loneliness anymore. Because it is not loneliness. It is my life coming back to me.